mycomputercareer.edu. Training for a better life. Now, obviously, in case you didn't know, you should know since you listen to me every day. You know you can catch me right here on ESPN Radio. Check your AM, FM listing nearest you in over 250-plus markets across the United States of America. Plus, you can catch me on SiriusXM Channel 80. Plus, you can catch me on ESPN Television. I got to tell you something. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. This is a beautiful, beautiful day. I must say, as you think about the things that transpired on a football Sunday, I'll get into that Jay Gruden firing at 5 a.m. this morning in just a few minutes. Because I know news. And obviously when you're talking about news, looking at my man JC, looking at my man Jonathan Winthrop through that screen right there, when you're talking about the news, obviously the Jay Gruden firing is significant news, particularly coming out of the nation's capital. The thing is, though, I got other things on my mind first. I watched those Cowboys yesterday. I got to tell you something right now. It's interesting watching what's transpiring right before our very eyes. A couple weeks ago, all you Cowboy fans out there, the world over, not just in the South, where my buddies reside, Jerry and Stephen Jones, but also all across the world, all across these United States of America. There's Cowboy fans everywhere. Wear your stars on your hats, your baseball caps, the jerseys. Talk about how you gonna win the championship, Super Bowl championship. Been 24 years and counting it, but that's neither here nor there. We looked at the Cowboys over the first 3 games of this season, and we said, I'm mighty proud of those boys. Look at them go. They beat up on the New York Giants, led by Eli Manning. Then they turned around and went against the Washington Redskins. We see what happened there. And then after that, they went up against those Miami Dolphins. Just stop the presses. What a formidable football franchise they are. I guess we're thinking a little bit differently right now, right? It's just been a couple of weeks since that time. If you recall, ladies and gentlemen, there's something called Thursday Night Football. You listening to me, JC? Are you listening to me? There's something called Cowboy fans watching Thursday Night Football. And at that particular juncture, we watched the Cowboys 3-0 undefeated. And we said, hey, you know what? Cowboys, if the Eagles lose that Thursday Night Football game to those Green Bay Packers, and we turn around and we beat those Drew Brees-less New Orleans Saints, led by Teddy Bridgewater, we'd be at 4-0. They'd be at 1-3. We'd be 3 games ahead of the Philadelphia Eagles in that NFC East, and by golly, gosh darn it, we'd had a division. It'd be lock, stock, and barrel. That's where we gonna have it. And here we sit, just a mere 10 days later. You hear me, Jonathan Winthrop? I'm talking to you too, buddy. Just 10 little days later. That's a week and a half for those of you who don't understand the difference. Just 10 little days later, we sit here, Cowboys, losers of 2 in a row, Eagles, winners of 2 in a row, and lo and behold, we got a stalemate right at 3-2 at the top of the NFC East division. And suddenly we look at those Cowboys. Dak Prescott, not looking too smart right now that you didn't sign that extension. Not looking too smart right now. I reckon that Dak Prescott being out there, putting himself on the line, putting that health on the line, only making $2 million a year this season, I reckon somebody needs to tell Dak Prescott, hey, wait a minute there, buddy. You might want to sign that contract extension as opposed to being focused on setting the market. You might want to take a couple of $1 million less just to make sure you getting 30+ million. You mean you can break a leg, twist an ankle. You can do a lot of things on that football field, especially with guys like that dude, Zadarius Smith. Beautiful last name, by the way. Coming right at you. Might want to do something about that. Preston Smith, too. Another beautiful last name. He was all over the place yesterday, too. Might want to do a little something about that. Ezekiel Elliott had 62 yards rushing, a 62-yard rushing performance. Even though he averaged about 5 yards a carry, here's the bottom line. Might want to do a little something about that. Amari Cooper had 226 yards receiving, yet you still lost. Might want to do a little something about that. Dak Prescott, 3 interceptions. Might want to do a little something about that. Jason Garrett's your coach. Kellen Moore is your first-year offensive coordinator. Suddenly you be a little bit humble. Jason Garrett out there earning penalties for bad behavior in the Fifth of Mouth, cussing at officials like he's never been known to do. I'm wondering about those Cowboys right now. All you Cowboy fans everywhere, you all right? Are you okay? I only got one thing to say about this, other than the fact that Green Bay's defense looks for real, other than the fact that Aaron Rodgers is still that bad man even when he don't have to be, other than the fact that their running back, Aaron Jones, is something special when he wants to be, evidently, against those Cowboys. At the end of the day, what we can't ignore, what we must pay attention to, is that those Cowboys seem like some of you out there might have been a bit premature, wouldn't you say? I guess you'll finally get it together after all, recognizing the fact that indeed you haven't arrived. But I got some news for you. Old Stevie A here for you. You know why? Because Stevie A loves you. Not just the kids. He loves you too. He sure does. He sure does. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. You are listening live. The Stephen A. Smith Show. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. Now, little old cowboy Stephen A. will be back in just a little while. For the moment, got to get to some news. As you all may remember, last Monday, I came on the air and I said to you that Jay Gruden would be fired today. I said he would be fired the day after they lost to the New England Patriots. They would lose to the New England Patriots. It would be in a lopsided fashion, at which time the Redskins would fire him as head coach of their franchise. Well, it came to fruition. Patriots won 33-7 yesterday. Jay Gruden looked like a lost puppy, had players in the locker room crying on his behalf because they love him so. Nevertheless, the record didn't show it. 35-49-1 as head coach of the Washington Redskins franchise, at which time, under the stewardship of Jay Gruden, on Daniel Snyder, the owner for the Washington Redskins, on his staff, once upon a time under Jay Gruden with Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, and Matt LaFleur. All three head coaches are doing damn good jobs in the National Football League at this particular juncture. Sean McVay just finished going to a Super Bowl. Excuse me. Kyle Shanahan has the San Francisco Giants undefeated heading into Monday Night Football today against the Cleveland Browns with Baker Mayfield and Odell Beckham Jr. And Matt LaFleur, courtesy of the Packers beating the Cowboys yesterday, are 4-1 on the season, having beaten Chicago, having beaten Minnesota, having beaten the Dallas Cowboys in 3 of their first 5 games. So we have to recognize the fact that if you're Daniel Snyder, what happened? What really happened? You know what? You hired the wrong damn man as the coach, and you kept the wrong damn man on the job for far too long. If we're really being honest, The fact of the matter is, one could easily argue the only reason Jay Gruden had the head coaching job in the nation's capital to begin with is because he had a beautiful last name. Because anytime you think of Gruden, you think about one man, and that would be John Gruden, who's a Super Bowl champion as a coach, who's now the $100 million man plus for the Oakland Raiders, who walked into London yesterday with the world telling him and everybody else that Khalil Mack was going to get the best of them because John Gruden unceremoniously booted him out of Oakland. And what does John Gruden and the Oakland Raiders do? Albeit without Mitchell Trubisky, they ended up beating the Chicago Bears. That's what we saw. That's what we got. It is what it is. And that's that. John Gruden and the Oakland Raiders, one could argue, have proven that they're heading in a forward direction, that they're doing the kind of things that build a winning culture. And you got to give John Gruden some love for that. Jay Gruden deserves no such thing. Jay Gruden, I don't know the man personally. I'm certainly not knocking him personally. And I'm not going to give any credence to the reports about laziness or incompetence or not the want it factor. I don't know Jay Gruden. I'm in no position to judge him in that fashion. But I will tell you this. His record certainly exemplifies that. Now, they're like 1-11 or 1-12 since Alex Smith went down. And by the way, Alex Smith, who suffered that nasty leg injury against the Houston Texans last year at FedEx Field, I don't know why he and his lovely wife would pick the Patriots game as a game to show up at. I don't know why they wouldn't just stay the hell home rather than to see that beat down. But nevertheless, they were in attendance for the game yesterday. And they watched the New England Patriots run roughshod over the Washington Redskins. And as a result, the Redskins get smashed. Jay Gruden's dismissal was a foregone conclusion. Most people knew that it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. People were surmising, would it be at the end of the season? Would it be at the halfway mark, et cetera, et cetera? I reported a week ago it would go down today. That's what the hell happened. My point is, I feel sorry for the man from the standpoint that I don't wish firing on anybody. I want a person to continue to get paid and have the ability to feed their families. And I'm quite sure that's not going to be a problem for Jay Gruden. The flip side to it, however, is that he's a man one could easily argue should have never been a head coach to begin with, or at the very least should have been relieved of his duties years ago, so you could have kept McVay, Shanahan, or LaFleur to be the head coach of this franchise, rather than keeping him on board at the expense of losing all three of those guys. But Daniel Snyder elected not to do that, and as a result, he's been vilified. He's constantly vilified as not the greatest owner in the world, and we get all of that. And in the end, what it comes down to is that they had to move in a different direction because they really, really had no choice. Plain and simple. 888-SAY-ESPN. It's 888-729-3776. You're listening live to Stephen A. ESPN Radio, ESPN News. That needed to be what was said. Now I want to move on to something that some would consider a bit dicey. I do not. Reading, apparently for those of you who didn't hear the news, there's a big controversy going on involving the Houston Rockets. Daryl Morey, there's obviously protests taking place in Hong Kong. China's regime, their power in place, had a problem with a tweet that Rockets general manager Daryl Morey sent out in support of those protesters. And as a result, there's been a whole maelstrom of controversy. You got lawmakers coming to the defense of Daryl Morey, speaking up for him, who spoke up on behalf of the protesters and democracy. Rockets owner Tillman Fertitta was quick to distance himself, or to distance the team, rather, from Morey's statement on Friday. Quoting Morey's now deleted post, he said that the GM spoke only for himself and emphasized the Rockets are, quote, not a political organization, end quote. This part we get. We understand it. Even James Harden came out and said, we apologize. You know, we love China. We love playing there. For both of us individually, we go there once or twice a year. They show us the most important love. The NBA's official English language statement on the matter expressed regret to our friends and fans in China without directly condemning Mori. Quote, we have great respect for the history and culture of China and hope that sports and the NBA can be used as a unifying force to bridge cultural differences and bring people together. The NBA said Monday on that account that it was extremely disappointed by Mori's inappropriate tweet about Hong Kong, which, quote, severely hurt the feelings of Chinese fans. Similarly harsh toward Mori was a long statement by Brooklyn Nets owner Joe Tsai, Tsai. Is that how you pronounce his name, John? I'm not sure. Tsai, owner for the Brooklyn Nets, who also owns Tencent, which obviously has a deal with China. I'm sorry, with the NBA to broadcast NBA games in China, things of that nature. According to the Brooklyn owner's statement, he said, quote, supporting a separatist movement in a Chinese territory is one of those third rail issues, not only for the Chinese government, but also for all citizens in China. 1.4 billion Chinese citizens stand united when it comes to the territorial integrity of China and the country's sovereignty over her homeland. This issue is non-negotiable. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this. I have nothing to say about China, Hong Kong, the protests that take place there, what have you. Do I have my feelings about it? Sure do. Absolutely. And living in the United States of America, you can imagine what they may be. Here's the reality. Just like Stephen A. works for ESPN, covering the NBA, both entities doing business in China and with China, also understanding that certain things that one may be ignorant to or whatever. Here's the point that I am qualified to say. Daryl Morey, a good man, an exceptional executive, and a conscientious human being. What were you thinking speaking up on this issue? That much I can say. Because you see, as your team is over there, and you take this kind of position, it's not just about your feelings. It's about the Houston Rockets. It's about the National Basketball Association. It's about a multitude of people that extends far beyond yourself, that you have compromised because you had this insatiable appetite to disseminate a tweet. You don't know better than that? You don't know better than that. See, folks want to sit up here and act like we all should have the license to say what we want to say, how we want to say it, to whomever we damn well please, because it's in the interest of righteousness. Ladies and gentlemen, things aren't that simple all the time. Your view of how things should be isn't always shared. And sometimes you take a unilateral or a monolithic approach to things, and they're neither unilateral or monolithic in any way. What am I saying here? I'm saying that Daryl Morey had an obligation to think about the Houston Rockets organization and about the National Basketball Association before himself, particularly when all that entailed you was an impulse. Did anybody take a moment to think about what this may have done to Yao Ming, who starred for the Houston Rockets for years, whose presence on the Houston Rockets made the Houston Rockets organization the #1 NBA commodity in China? He's now overseeing the whole Chinese Basketball Federation. Whatever debates we may have about how their nation is different than ours, and how their rights might differ from ours and what have you. Who's to say that Yao Ming wasn't working towards progress? And how there's a dance that he's got to exercise in the process of trying to facilitate better relations to the point where greater influence can ultimately come about. And how those words alone might have compromised him in his own nation because of his support of the Rockets organization and unquestionably Daryl Morey. I want to say for the record, I don't think that Daryl Morey intended for all of this to go down. But I want this to be a lesson to everybody. You got trolls in social media, and you got ignorant-ass people out there talking their nonsense all the time, acting like you got a license to stick out your chest, do what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, because it's right in their eyes, and damn it, that's all that's required. Well, it's not all that's required when you're representing somebody else, and you got your hand out taking money from somebody else. You don't get to just represent yourself. You represent them too. And I'm going to say this, and I don't know if anybody else is going to say this, but I'll be damned if I'm going to avoid saying this. There is no one who should understand that better than folks here at ESPN. That's right, I said it. Jimmy Pitaro succeeds John Skipper, comes over to ESPN, and one of the first things he said publicly that he was unapologetic about is, we're a sports network. We're not a political network. That's what he said. Excuse me. That's what he said. People tune into us to expect sports. It doesn't mean that we're devoid of any feeling, any passion, or anything intelligent to eloquent and articulate to the masses as it pertains to political views. It means that there's a level of understanding that we should have. That when it comes to the issue of politics, that's not what people tune into ESPN for. And we have an obligation to take that into consideration before we open our mouth and take the kind of position that could potentially compromise Walt Disney, ESPN, or anything else. That's the real world. Doesn't matter what job you have. You have an obligation to adopt and embrace the interest of those you collect a paycheck from. Those same trolls, those same commentators, columnists and beyond out there that will encourage you to be real, straightforward, stick out your chest, go for it all. You don't see them talking about people that pay them. See, that's the real world. It's not to say you stand still with your hands tied behind your back and do nothing. It's not to say that you be silent, inactive, non-active, and do nothing. What it is to say is that you don't just think about yourself when you act. That's what boys and girls do. That's what children do. Grown-ups, adults, people who understand what it's like to build something, to have something, and to be responsible for people other than themselves, they get that you don't just speak willy-nilly, run your mouth without any thoughts of the consequences coming down the pike because of the lives you affected beyond yourself. It's what adults do. Daryl Morey is an adult. It's a good man and a quality executive. This action by him was just not smart. People can stand up and defend what he said all they want to. That ain't the point. It wasn't his place. And Tillman Fertitta was absolutely 1,000% right in separating him and individualizing him from the rest of the Rockets organization, because he had no business doing what he did. A 20-year relationship between the Rockets and China, virtually down the tubes. Jobs lost. Millions of dollars compromised. Because you want to tweet a sentence. Come on now. It's time to grow up, people. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Boogie McFarland will be on in hour number 2. We'll get to your calls and more in a minute. Lots more to talk about with Dallas, Redskins, and beyond. So stick around and touch that dial. You're listening live to the Stephen A. Smith Show, ESPN Radio, ESPN News. By the way, head to the Home Depot to find guaranteed lowest prices on top brand name appliances like Samsung, LG, and GE.